most people have heard of the infamous hot coffee lawsuit. It's often brought up as a symbol of America's so-called frivolous lawsuits. The story is usually told like this. An old woman spilled coffee on herself and walked away with millions. But that version of the story is misleading, and in many ways completely false. What really happened in Liebeck versus McDonald's restaurants is a shocking tale of corporate negligence, a grandmother's fight for justice, and a media spin that forever changed how we think about lawsuits. Today, we're diving deep into the real story, one that's far more disturbing and far more important than the jokes make it seem. Stella Liebeck was a 79-year-old widow from Albuquerque, New Mexico. She wasn't rich. She wasn't litigious. She lived a modest life, had children and grandchildren, and had never sued anyone before. In 1992, Stella's grandson Chris drove her to a local McDonald's for a simple treat, a cup of coffee. This was meant to be a normal morning, a quick stop at the drive-thru, nothing unusual. What happened next would put Stella at the center of one of the most misunderstood legal cases in American history. After buying the coffee, Chris pulled the car into a parking spot. The car wasn't moving, Stella wasn't driving. She placed the cup of coffee between her knees, trying to carefully remove the lid to add cream and sugar. But the lid gave way, and the scalding liquid spilled directly into her lap. She was wearing cotton sweatpants, which absorbed the liquid and held it against her skin. Within seconds, Stella Liebeck suffered third-degree burns across her thighs, groin, and buttocks. Her injuries were catastrophic. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors confirmed the burns covered 16% of her body, with 6% being third degree. She required multiple skin grafts, weeks of hospitalization, and 2 years of medical treatment. This was no minor accident. Stella's burns were so severe that her physicians described them as life-threatening. She lost nearly 20 pounds in the hospital and was permanently scarred. This wasn't just hot coffee. McDonald's corporate policy at the time was to serve coffee at 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, 82 to 90 degrees Celsius. To put that in perspective, home-brewed coffee is usually served around 140 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 to 65 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, if spilled, it takes about 20 seconds to cause third-degree burns. But at McDonald's temperatures, severe burns occur in just 2 to 7 seconds. Why did McDonald's insist on keeping coffee so dangerously hot? Their reason: coffee needed to stay hot for commuters who might drink it later. But what this meant is that every single customer was being handed a product capable of causing devastating injuries almost instantly, and McDonald's knew it. After her long hospitalization and surgeries, Stella didn't immediately run to court. She wrote to McDonald's, simply asking them to cover her medical bills, about $20,000. McDonald's refused. Instead, they offered her $800. It wasn't until that insulting offer that Stella hired a lawyer. Even then, her case wasn't about getting rich. She wanted her bills paid and McDonald's to lower the temperature of their coffee so no one else would go through what she had suffered. When Stella's case went to trial in 1994, the evidence against McDonald's was damning. Over 700 complaints. McDonald's had documented more than 700 reports of coffee burns in the previous decade. Some cases were as severe as Stella's. McDonald's knew the risks. Internal memos showed they were aware of the danger but had no plans to lower the temperature. No warnings. At the time, McDonald's cups had no clear warning about the extreme heat. One McDonald's quality assurance manager even admitted in testimony that the company knew coffee served at that temperature wasn't fit for consumption when sold. The jury was stunned. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern of negligence. The jury awarded Stella $200,000 in compensatory damages to cover her medical bills and suffering. Because the jury found her 20% at fault for spilling the coffee, that amount was reduced to $160,000. But then came the punitive damages, the punishment for McDonald's conduct. The jury awarded $2.7 million. Why that number? because it equaled roughly 2 days of McDonald's coffee sales. The jury wanted to send a message. When a corporation ignores hundreds of injuries to save money, it must be held accountable. The judge later reduced the punitive damages to $480,000, and the case was settled confidentially. But the impact was already massive. Almost immediately, the case was twisted by the media. Headlines mocked Stella as greedy and careless. Talk shows and comedians made her the butt of jokes. The narrative became, an old lady spills coffee on herself and sues for millions. The truth, that she was severely burned, that McDonald's had ignored hundreds of complaints, and that she only asked for medical costs at first but was buried. The case became a rallying cry for those pushing tort reform, laws that limit lawsuits and damages. Stella Liebeck herself was vilified, even though she never sought fame or fortune. To this day, people still repeat the myth without knowing the facts. The hot coffee case left a lasting legacy. It became a key example in debates about frivolous lawsuits. It exposed how corporations sometimes choose profits over customer safety. It showed how media can distort a story until the truth is almost unrecognizable. In 2011, an HBO documentary called Hot Coffee revisited the case and revealed the real facts, sparking new conversations about consumer rights and corporate accountability. Stella Liebeck passed away in 2004, but her case continues to shape legal discussions today. So, was it really just a silly lawsuit? Number. It was a story about a grandmother who suffered life-threatening injuries because a giant corporation refused to take responsibility. Stella Liebeck's case was never about greed. It was about safety, accountability, and justice. Next time someone jokes about the hot coffee lawsuit, you'll know the truth. It wasn't frivolous, it was a warning. And one we should still remember today.